right, psychology nerds, and welcome to a brand new season of Psychology and Stuff, the podcast from Good Cause Productions at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. I'm your host, Alison Jane Martingano, and today we're going to be exploring recent changes in what have been long-standing global trends in happiness, well-being, and their opposites like stress, anxiety, and despair. I'm joined today by two experts. The first is Dr. Eileen Cooper. She's a professor emeritus of human development at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. Her scholarship focuses on death, dying, and bereavement, with a particular attention to how young adults experience grief and the role of the internet in shaping understandings of loss and the effectiveness of bereavement camps as grief interventions. She's the founder and director of Camp Lloyd, a summer camp for children who have lost a loved one, where UWGB students serve as trained big buddies to support grieving campers. She currently works as a counselor at the Wellness Center after receiving her licenseship in professional counseling. Michelle Garger is also joining us. She's the executive director of the University Wellness and Student Counseling Services at UW Green Bay. She's a licensed professional counselor and clinical substance abuse counselor. She oversees clinical and administrative operations at the Wellness Center and provides counseling to students on issues ranging from depression and anxiety to trauma, grief, and substance use. She earned her bachelor's degree in sociology from UW Stevens Point and her master's degree in educational psychology and community counseling from UW Milwaukee. We're both here today to talk about these changes in global happiness. So to give a bit of a background on what the traditional trends have been, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Eileen, is that young people, young adults would be happy, the happiest time of their life, maybe some people say. And then happiness usually would drop in midlife, maybe a midlife crisis, and then it would rise again when retirement age. And so you saw this U-shaped curve in happiness. And people are claiming that this has now changed. But before we get on to it changing, Eileen, I'd like you to tell me, is this U-shaped curve what we normally see?
I am a big skeptic of research that gloms a whole population together and looks at these trends. I think you have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Um, I think that what inspired a lot of this research are some of those developmental theories, like the theory of Erik Erikson, who talked about these different crises that occur across the lifespan. There was a writer named Levinson who many years ago wrote a book, The Season of a Man's Life, who talked about these, waxes and wanes in terms of life satisfaction is another term that is used. And I always remember being struck by him discussing how when young couples have preschoolers, young children at home, that is the most stressful time in one's life. And as somebody who raised two kids, I can attest to that. Given that, I really look askance at that data because it gloms whole populations together. And you really have to wonder, who are they really talking about? This prototypical person who really doesn't exist, who will follow that kind of developmental trend. Um, I wonder in terms of when you look at people being happier the older that they get, I tend to look at the statistics with regard to suicide, and you still find that elderly white men have the highest rate of death by suicide than any other age cohort, and that in middle-aged women, there's an increase as well. So, who is happy, and what do we mean by that?
Yeah, that's such an important point. So this overall average might give us this U-shaped curve, but for any individual person or group, it might look different. So it might be different for men or women, might be different for people of different races or nationalities. What was particularly interesting about this study that we're going to talk about in a moment is they showed that the over averaged, and it was averaged across 84 different countries in this case. They say that in the last few years, so about 2017 till now, that the bottom half of this U has fallen away. In other words, young people who used to be happy are now reporting not being as happy. And I know that when I first told you this result, Eileen, you said that it didn't surprise you. So talk to me about what you think about this new trend.
Okay. I think that part of it is how people are perceiving what you need in order to be happy. So I think that social media in particular has presented this portrait of people who are happy and they are in circumstances to which the bar is set so high that nobody can match that. And so I think that the expectations for what it takes to be happy has far exceeded most people's ability to match that. I always think back about my parents who grew up in a impoverished area in Eastern Europe, and they would tell me in their childhood, my father in particular, if he had a pot of potatoes on the stove, that he was thrilled. And that's a measure of happiness. Nowadays, that ain't gonna cut it. It's more like a five-bedroom home on 3.5 acres in a very posh neighborhood. That's what makes people aspire to. I will be happy when I can buy that home. So,
Yeah, and I think I like to think of myself as one of the young people, although in this data I would probably be grouped with the middle age. But I think this idea of expectations is so important. So when I was growing up, which was in the 90s, I sort of did. I did it. I expected to be able to own a home. I expected to be able to have the same life, if not a better life, than my parents. And I think that the realization that I can achieve these lofty goals, it hurts because I didn't aspire to it. I expected it.
right.
And that expectation then leads to disappointment.
Yes, it does. If there's a mismatch between what you expect and what when you look at that social media and you see that everybody else has these things and you don't, that's very hard to deal with. Um, and I also think that the perception of being happy might have changed as well. And I do wonder how that is interpreted from one culture to the next.
Yeah, no. So most of this data is coming from self-reports and questionnaires, right? So they're asking questions like, how happy are you? And so it's certainly possible that different cultures would interpret that question. I wonder whether the young people today are interpreting that question differently from maybe the young people 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do think that that makes a huge difference. I do, again, I think what it is that we aspire to and what we hope for has become totally different. I do think that a number of years ago with my cohort, we expected that if we landed the job that was going to be for our entire life, and we would be happy with that job. Nowadays, the expectation might be, well, I'll do this for this period of time, and then I'm going to do something else some other time. And the belief that it's one lifetime, one career no longer exists. So I think that's an expectation that has changed.
Huh. So I'd like to shift over to talk about how that might play out in the local UWGB or maybe the broader Wisconsin context. So as we've been saying, it's not the same for everyone. That maybe globally we see this U-shaped dip, but it's not always the same for everybody. So do you see this in the wellness center? Do students today seem to be unhappier than students before?
I'm not sure if I would say they're unhappier than students before. I think the concerns are more complex that students are coming in with. We see just overall in the UW system, students are coming into college with having prior mental health treatment, which is newer. We didn't always see that. Sometimes students would come to college and that's the first time they access mental health care because maybe their parents didn't believe in it, didn't offer them resources, or they didn't know about it, and then they come to college and it's included as part of their tuition, it's much easier to access. But definitely seeing more complex needs coming in.
Yeah. So could you talk about what that means? What is a more complex need?
So we might see students coming in with, I would say overall, we see a lot of students that have anxiety and depression, and that has held steady over the years that I've been here. But now we're seeing students that um, have trauma history that's connected to those overlaying symptoms. They might have some other diagnoses connected. It's not uncommon to see a student with 4 diagnosed conditions that they're coming in with. So it just adds a complexity to what we're seeing.
Yeah. And what do you think about Eileen's idea about social media and expectations? Is that something you see playing out in our students here?
Absolutely. I mean, it is just so different to think about growing up without social media, to think about growing up with social media, and it's constant. It's just you walk around campus, you see people on their phones, and that's not just the students. I think that's all of us.
No, we're all getting absolutely.
Connected to our phones. So it's just all the time. And then you look at all the things happening in the world. So there's just a lot of anxiety provoking content out there that we're seeing all the time.
Yeah, so this feels like quite a juxtaposition. So simultaneously, maybe our expectations are heightened by social media because we want the big house and we want the perfect job. And simultaneously, we're seeing these incredibly anxiety producing political posts and things like that. So, how does that play out when you're kind of getting both of those pieces of information happening at the same time?
Where do you go to just turn things off?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that that promotes anxiety. All of it. I can't meet these expectations. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. I don't know what to do with my life. It's scary stuff. It's scary stuff for my cohort. I can't imagine being, you know, on the cusp of adulthood and trying to figure this out and what kind of world am I going to encounter as I grow old in age? So it's scary that way. I think with my cohort when I was in college, um, I think we thought that the world was always going to get better. That was the perspective, that it was going to get better, that my parents' generation screwed things up. We're going to fix it. I don't know if the current generation has that sense. I think there's more a sense of learned helplessness. I'm not going to vote. It doesn't matter. I can't do this. It doesn't matter. I think that people feel much more helpless than they did in the past. And I think that that's true for all cohorts.
Mm. So, what is it that we can do on campus to reduce this feeling of helplessness? Is it useful to take part in student organizations or what helps?
Social support.
But not social media.
No,
Social
Okay.
support and social
like
connection.
real, like, hi, Michelle. How are you doing? Like, hi, my name's Eileen. What's your name? Those basic social interactions that don't take place anymore. And that's the thing that I see in the wellness center is more and more students coming in socially anxious. I'm lonely, but I don't know how to meet people on campus. I'm shy. I don't know how to talk to people. I'll get on my phone. I'll send them a text. But to talk face to face, have eye contact with somebody, get those endorphins going by just being with another human being, that isn't there.
And I think, we promote that a lot, that social connection. I think today is Org Smorg, I want to say from 3 to 6. And we promote that because I think there's over 130 groups I heard recently, student organizations. It'd be hard not to find something that would interest somebody. And I always think that walking into a room where you know there's going to be a common interest already. So if my interest is a psychology club, if I walk in there, I'm going to find other people interested in psychology, whatever the club may be. And so I think student groups are a great way to get connected on campus.
It is, yes.
And so that social support, is it the, when we're talking about happiness, is it they make us happy in the moment? It's like, "Oh, we had a great time. We, I don't know, made pancakes at this org." Or is it that it helps with these more existential worries about the world? Or is it both, maybe? Please tell me it's both.
I think it's both.
Yes.
I keep on going back so for 10 years, I took students on a travel class to South Africa, and it was human development in South Africa. And one of the things that we did with the students is we worked in the townships. Now, without going into the history of South Africa suffered from racial separatism called apartheid, and it still exists. So, a lot of the population lives in these incredibly impoverished areas. And in terms of gauging happiness, this was an eye opener for all of us from Northeast Wisconsin who had certain expectations. And here were people who were happy if they had one meal a day. Okay. And um, I asked in one of the tours where people were living in incredible poverty, no running water, no sanitation, no food, no employment, okay, minimal health care. And I asked, what is the suicide rate here? And the person who was taking us around said, minimal. And I went, oh my goodness, she said, it's the white people that jump off the Blaukrans Bridge, which is a very famous bridge in South Africa. And I said, why is that? And she told me it was because of Ubuntu, which is a cradle of South Africa, and it means I am because of you. And really, what it means is that the degree of social support there and the caring for one another is palpable. It really, you can just see it. And I think it makes a world of difference. And I think that that's what we really need to push on our campus for our students.
So I remember when I was reading about this data and this change and this drop in happiness, which they claim starts around 2017, although some say as early as 2014, because I was thinking about COVID and how that led to this, social disseparation. Um, but it really seems like it started before COVID, but maybe COVID accelerated it. How do you think that plays into what we're talking about?
I think that at a crucial time when the social parts of your brain are getting wired, kids learn that people are toxic and you have to stay 6 feet away from them. And I think it really is tough to overcome that lesson that happened at a critical period developmentally. I'm hoping that n- younger kids now are getting socialized in school and maybe some of that will be overcome. But I think that our current cohort of college students really were very much impacted by that. Would you say that, Michelle?
Oh, absolutely. And I think more to your point, if you're looking pre-pandemic, that some of these changes were starting to occur, and we go back to social media. I think I would be interested to see where the intensity is picked up. When did TikTok come around? When did additional social media get added that people were on their phones more? 'Cause I don't know if that would explain some of the pre-pandemic.
I guess they go together, right? I mean, if we're sitting at home and we're not able to go out and meet our friends, we're going to turn to social media as a way of connection. So the two sort of compound each other over and over again. I did want to touch a little bit on, so just to shift the conversation a little bit into something I'm interested in a completely self centered way. So I do research that, I mean, you probably won't approve of because I do group people together in large numbers. But I do it on empathy. And a study I published recently shows that there was declining empathy across generations up until about 2009. And then it's been rising. And so our most recent generations of students, our youngest people today, are one of the highest empathic generations that I've seen. So it almost seems like the kids today are suffering. They have all of these mental health problems and maybe a drop in happiness because of these heightened expectations. And simultaneously, they're one of the most caring and compassionate and empathic generations. And I just think that's fascinating and really does seem to push against the idea of, oh, darn, those kids today. Like they're hurting, but they're still compassionate. Do you think the two things are connected?
Well, I think when you're part of empathy is being concerned about others. And so there's a lot to be concerned about.
Right. Right.
That's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that very basic explanation. Others are suffering, so I feel for them more.
Right. I see suffering. It hurts me. I'm feeling their pain in addition to my own. So
I also think that people are much more open about their suffering. So I go remember when I grew up on the East Coast, and I remember when we came to Wisconsin, I was shocked by how private people were here. And so on the East Coast, we all let it hang out. We would wear our foibles on our clothing. You saw everything. And here people kept their problems to themselves. I remember a student telling me many years ago, here we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We don't go for help. And I think that that has really, really changed. And I think and that's why I think that the wellness center was underutilized many years ago. And now students come in, they're not ashamed to talk about the issues that they're confronting. And I think that that engenders more empathy too.
So is it possible then that this change we're seeing in this sort of global happiness data isn't that people are actually unhappier, but they're just more willing to be honest about feeling unhappier, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
depends on who they're talking to.
Yeah, that's true too.
If it's on social media, people tend to portray that really positive. This was the best time ever. But maybe when they're talking to their peers or they're coming in and talking to a counselor or other people on campus, they're more willing to share the real struggles that they have.
I know I'm not a counselor, but I've just made this assumption as we're talking that this is a good thing, that talking about our problems. Is that right? I just want to make sure I've got that right.
Yes, because we talked about support and connection.
Mm.
It's so important that people get support when they're going through a hard time. And I can't believe that there's anybody out there that could come into the wellness center and tell one of our counselors something they've never heard. It's just, we hear a lot of stories. So there's nothing, somebody could come and tell us that we haven't heard before.
Right.
There's a lot of times I think people suffer alone because they think, well, the thing I'm dealing with is so terrible, or I'm so terrible that nobody could listen to this.
That's right. Or I'm the only one who's experiencing that, so they can't relate. When you were speaking, the one thing that I remember is there is research that examines variables that lead to positive outcomes from therapy. And it doesn't matter what theory the therapist adheres to. It doesn't matter the therapeutic style that they use. The one main variable that seems to cut across all outcome data is what we call the therapeutic alliance, which is the relationship between the therapist and the client. And again, it's that connection. It's talking to another human being and that other human being saying, I get it. I understand. I'm here for you. I don't know if I can fix it, but you have somebody to lean on. And that means so much in so many ways. Again, that suicide data for elderly white men, not true for elderly married. Interesting. Okay. It's more for single elderly white men who are alone.
Mm. As you're talking, I'm thinking that this idea of being happy and wanting to be happy. I think we all. I'm going to go ahead and say all. I try not to generalize like that, but we all want to be happy. But I'm wondering maybe whether that's one of those expectations that then's going to make us unhappy, and so we're turning this into sort of essentially a vicious cycle by wanting to be happy all the time and then not being able to. Is it possible that being happy shouldn't be the goal, and that maybe this isn't the problem?
Okay. I've heard it referred to as the hedonic treadmill. We just you get that thing that you wanted and then you go for the next thing. So you're just constantly, you get to one thing, you go to the next. And so I think it's really important to enjoy the process of what you're trying to attain. Enjoying, and that's where mindfulness can be really helpful, is to just stay in the present. You still have the goals, but you're enjoying things on the way to the goals.
Completely ruined my script for the rest of the podcast because no, I had this whole section on how we were going to talk about like solutions to the happiness problem, but now I'm wondering whether maybe it's not a happiness problem. Maybe happiness is the wrong word. Eileen, earlier you said something about peace
Right.
instead of happiness. Could you tell me about what the difference is there?
Okay. So, when I was younger and I would bemoan everything, people would say to me when I was in college, "These are the best years of your life. What are you complaining about?" And I always thought, if these are the best years of my life, God, what I'm facing in the future really sucks.
Mm.
So I thought, why am I keep on trying to be happy? And my favorite quote is from Albert Einstein, who once said, "Happiness is for pigs." Okay. And given the fact that I'm not a pig, I thought, what could I aspire to? And what I really do aspire to is a sense of peace, a sense that I'm living the life that is congruent with what I value and what I think is important, and that I prioritize what is important to me over other things. I don't always do that, but the more I do, um, the better I feel. And I think my hero was my father, who once told me that when I go to sleep at night, I want to go to sleep with a good conscience, that I did the right thing during that day. And I really incorporated that into my personal credo. And that's what I try to aspire to. And that gives me a sense of peace.
So peace is the living in a way that fits your morals and your beliefs and your views about the world.
Congruence, being more authentic, living my authentic self, who I am.
As soon as you said that, I thought of social media again and how that's almost the opposite of that. We live a very inauthentic life online. I mean, I definitely do it. Anyone who looks at my social media can tell it's curated. It's, putting out a particular image. And that's not living authentic.
Right, right. I mean, talk about inauthenticity. Now that we have everything that's generated by AI, how do you know what's real and not real anymore?
Oh man, that's a whole separate podcast. That's a whole separate thing.
And I think kind of what Eileen's getting at too is just having some psychological flexibility.
Oh, yeah.
And just put a little shameless plug for our Pathways program at the Wellness Center. It's a 3-session workshop, and it really is designed to talk about ways to be more psychologically flexible. So we tend to approach problems in our lives the same way, kind of over and over. It's not working, but we're not shifting. We're going to keep doing it that way. And we talk specifically about skills. Even just have to a slight shift
Mm.
in how you approach something can make a huge difference.
I feel like I should sign up for this session.
We'd love to have you come, but then we'd want you to lead it.
Yeah, see, I'm really resonating though with what you said about attacking the same problem the same way, and needing new strategies, right? Like we need a toolbox with different tools that fit the problem better.
Some days the thing that you do to cope works really well, and some days it doesn't, and then it's like, "Okay, now what?" So, like you said, a toolbox is great just to have different things to pull out and try on different days.
Yeah. Option A and option B and option C.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the way down the line.
I'm gonna cut it short because I think we're running out of time, but, I think maybe you just did it already, but I'd like you to just give one final takeaway, if you can, for our listeners. If you had a piece of advice of how to achieve peace or how to achieve happiness, what would you say?
Make friends, real friends, people that exist, that breathe in front of you. Say hi to somebody. What is the worst thing that could happen to you? They go, "You're weird?" So what? Be weird. You'll find somebody else that'll say hi back.
Love that. And I think along those same lines, just finding connection, however it may be. There are so many resources on this campus for students to make connections with peers, with classmates. Um, the Dean of Students office offers non-clinical case management, and just they've seen a huge rise in needs that students have just in basic needs. There's just so many great programs, the Pride Center, the Multicultural Resource Center. There's so many spots to go on campus and get connected. And then to connect to people that do share your values. 'Cause that can mean a lot of difference in the type of support you get.
We'll make sure when we put this up online, we put some links to some of those resources that you're mentioning there. So thank you so much. Psychology and Stuff is brought to you by Good Cause Productions at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. The executive producer is Ryan Martin, the production manager is Rachel Sankey, and our creative director is Jenny Young. The media engineer for this episode is Rachel Sankey, supported by our technical director, Al Clune of LiveX. Special thanks to our guests today, Eileen Cooper and Michelle Galber. If you haven't already, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. I'm your host, Alison Jane Martingano. Keep being amazing.